Everyone who saw the 7 unkempt puppies abandon them declared them unadoptable. But when a rich man made the decision to give them a chance, years later, the whole community still laughed at him. What transpired in between will leave you stunned. Elliot. Those who made fun of him were on their knees, pleading for assistance. Despite having one of the most prestigious fortunes in the world, Lancaster, a quiet but generous millionaire, had always felt empty. Despite possessing a prosperous business empire and stunning estates in the state, his expansive mansion felt chilly and, for years prior, his beloved Labrador Luna, the companion that had been with him, had died in a terrible accident. Since he was a child, Elliot had avoided having another pet because he was too deeply affected by the loss. While making a charitable donation to a nearby shelter one cool autumn morning, he heard whispers about the staff was talking to a litter of puppies about 7 siblings who were discovered abandoned close to an old quarry. The pup's mother had passed away, and they were covered in fleas and scars. They were also so undernourished that they were skeleton. Staff at the shelter tactfully acknowledged that it was doubtful that these puppies would find homes because no one wants dogs like that. Elliot was interested by someone's whisper and asked to meet them when the door to there. When the enclosure opened, 7 small, shaky figures emerged, their fur spotty. Despite their condition, their tails showed their ribs beneath their thin coats. Wagged feebly, as one especially brave puppy staggered forward, swarming at Elliot's. The head of the shelter cautioned that they are extremely likely to require continuous care. Since nobody is willing to accept all 7 Elliot, we have actually thought about putting them down. Gazed at the puppies, then turned back to the director and said, "I'll take them." The staff looked at each other incredulously, attempting to stop their laughter. "Everyone?" someone asked, their voice dripping with incredulity. "Yes, everyone," Elliot responded forcefully. "Get the adoption paperwork ready," and promptly inform Elliot of his choice. Circulated around the community, and he was made fun of by his social circles, who called it They mocked the notion of a millionaire squandering his money on broken dogs as a publicity ploy or a midlife crisis. But, regardless, Elliot took the puppies home and started the difficult task of nursing them back to health. Didn't realize that his choice would soon completely upend both his life and the lives of others who made fun of him. With its expansive grounds and opulent interiors, Elliot's estate became He gave the 7 puppies, whom he named Riley as Harper Dakota Scout Bailey, a shelter. Each puppy, Logan and Quinn, had their own peculiarities. Riley's was the smallest, brave and daring in spite of her weakness. Bailey, the biggest, was protective of his. The most inquisitive and frequently playful of their siblings was Scout, who had a twisted ear. Mischief the first few days were exhausting, and the puppies needed constant attention. Regular veterinary examinations, specialized meals, and therapy for infections and skin disorders Elliot employed a group of. To assist with their rehabilitation, he spent hours with specialists like a veterinarian and a professional trainer. Day with the puppies, gradually but surely gaining their love and trust via kindness and patience, started to flourish. Their fur thickened and became glossier, and their personalities. The formerly shy pups blossomed and now played and chased one another through the expansive gardens of the estate. For the first time in years, the mansion reverberated with life under Elliot's vigilant scrutiny and laughter in spite of his happiness. The community's mockery grew more intense. Literally, rumors circulated after the local newspaper published a derisive title that read, "Millionaire's Mansion Goes to the Dogs." A charity was established by the town's elite, who thought Elliot's devotion to the puppies was at best strange and at worst stupid. A businessman called Richard Vaugh, who was one of Elliot's acquaintances, cornered him and grinned. "Elliot, what am I doing?" he asked, his voice brimming with excitement. "Heard about you adopting 7 strays." Condescension, Elliot calmly smiled back. Unaffected, "They're not strays." Richard laughed and shook his head, saying, "Anyway, Richard, they family. Sometimes Richard loves you, but Elliot's eyes are hardened, and they're just animals, so you're wasting your time. Gives back to you in unexpected ways. Perhaps one day, as the weeks stretch into months, you'll realize that." As Elliot's relationship with the puppies grew, he learned that they all possessed a remarkable capacity to perceive emotions on Riley would place her small head on Elliot's lap on days when he was feeling overwhelmed, her gentle eyes full of compassion when Bailey would lie at his feet, a silent guardian, while he labored through the night. Elliot thought about how much the puppies had transformed his life one evening when he was sitting by the fireplace. He continued, gently petting Dakota behind the ears as the dog wagged, giving me something I didn't even know I was missing. His tail as though he understood, but Elliot had to deal with more than just the mockery of the neighborhood. He believed that evil ER forces were involved because a gang of thieves had been rifling through the area's affluent estates, including Elliot's. The gang, led by a crafty individual, had their eye on the estate with its luxurious reputation. And ruthless individual, known only as Mason, started organizing their subsequent heist. The robbers moved at night, when darkness was hiding, and they sliced through the estate's perimeter fence, not realizing that the 7 pups, who were previously thought to be feeble, and there was hush across the estate as Mason and his unworthy will soon demonstrate how mistaken everyone had been. Armed with equipment and full of faith, the crew moved toward their black-clad counterparts that blended into the shadows. The grandiosity of the palace promised a treasure trove of priceless jewelry, artwork, and maybe even money hidden in safes. But what the group hadn't expected was the increased consciousness of the 7 puppies that had developed in terms of health, alertness, and intelligence under Elliot's care. Everyone had received training from the expert to identify odd noises and motions. Elliot had employed a trainer when they were still affectionate and playful friends. Were also a devoted pack that had formed strong bonds with both Elliot and one another. Riley's keen hearing detected a slight rustling sound close to the fence line, which was the first indication that something was amiss. Sound too intentional to be the wind. She growled softly as she awoke from her position beside the fireplace. One by one, the pups were nudged awake by Harper, the protector, and Bailey. Triggered their instincts, and together they moved in the direction of. Mason instructed his staff outdoors, their motions nearly undetectable against the glossy floors of the mansion. He murmured, "We'll be in and out before anyone knows we're here," while gesturing to the side entrance with hand motions. The squad picked the lock on the side door and nodded, their confidence reinforced by the seeming lack of security. The door snapped open without making a sound, and the intruders failed to account for the puppies' keen noses. The smell of strangers made Scout's nose quiver, and he gave a piercing bark. The group paused, their eyes darting around in the faint light as Mason whispered, "Relax, it's just a dog," reverberating through the holes. The biggest and strongest of the pups, Bailey, sprung into action and assumed the lead. He positioned himself close to the main entrance, with Logan and Dakota at his sides, their positions attentive and prepared. Riley and Harper hurried to wake Elliot, who was screaming and pounding on his bedroom door. Elliot was startled awake by the noise, his heart racing as he heard their cries and realized what was happening. He rubbed his eyes and whispered, "Guys," but it was obvious from the pup's frantic cries. Elliot watched the live feed from the mansion security cameras on his phone to make sure it wasn't a false alarm. Fell as he noticed the individuals going through the corridors. Without hesitation, he called 911, speaking in a firm but calm voice as he described the situation. "My dogs warned me that there were intruders in the house, so I sent aid." In the meantime, the intruders moved through the mansion, scouring priceless artwork with their flashlights and shining furnishings. Mason pointed to a sizable display cabinet that was stocked with vintage vases. Muttered, but Bailey entered the hallway before they could get to it. Mason halted in his tracks as the growl echoed like a warning, and he grabbed his flashlight, illuminating the dog's intimidating figure. One of the robbers murmured, stepping back and barking again. This time, the call came from Dakota, who showed up at the other end of the hallway with Logan at his side. The robbers were. Now that they're enclosed, the dog's growls are getting louder and more frightening. "They're only," Mason yelled, but there was a tinge of doubt in his voice. He then reached for a crowbar and brandished it in an effort to frighten them away. But the pups remained motionless and instead approached with well-coordinated motions. Elliot swiftly put on a disguise that suggested a degree of intelligence that unnerved the intruders in the master bedroom. Riley and Harper were following him as he went downstairs with his phone still in his jacket, and flashlight in hand. He whispered to the pups, "Help is on the way," as though they knew. As Mason's group started to fear in the corridor, one of them murmured, "Let's leave now. This isn't worth it." Mason snarled and walked toward the display case without anything to show for it. But as he did, Bailey. Mason was astonished when he sprang forward, his barking sharp and forceful. He staggered back and dropped the crowbar with a loud clang, which appeared to give the pups more confidence. Once self-assured robbers became a bewildered collection of guys as Scout and Quinn joined the others. Too preoccupied with retreat to recall their strategy, the group fled to the side entrance, only to discover Riley and Harper there. On their way out, Riley, the smallest member of the pack, barked so fiercely that Harper stood tall. Beside her, the siren snarled steadily and low, urging the intruders to approach. Mason's face twisted in exasperation as he realized that the wailing in the distance was getting louder by the second. "Let's leave. Their time was up," he yelled and shoved one of his men in the direction of the window. The pups followed the robbers to the edge of the property, their bars resonating through the air as they frantically fled. The gang had left their tools behind by the time the cops arrived at night. With few private belongings, including a wallet and a phone that would be used to identify them later, Elliot stood at the edge of the yard, his heart racing with pride and adrenaline as he looked at each of his devoted friends. One by one, the puppies. Despite the stress of the moment, "You saved us." They came back to his side, their tails wagging. He muttered, stooping to. "All of you," ruffled Bailey's ears as the detectives started their inquiry. One of them came up to Elliot, and he looked at him admiringly. "Your dogs are amazing," he claimed. "They kept them at bay long enough for us to arrive here." Elliot grinned as he replied, "They're not just dogs," he murmured quietly, looking down at the 7 puppies huddled around him. The morning following the break-in, the mansion was bustling with activity, including police officers, and investigators searched the property, gathering evidence that the intruders had left behind. The staff was shaken, but amazed at the bravery of the 7 puppies as they told the story to everybody who would listen. Uninjured, standing on the mansion's front steps, Elliot conversed with lead investigator Officer Martinez. As she flipped through her notepad, she said, "Your dogs did more than alert you. They probably stopped the issue from getting worse." Elliot looked at the puppies relaxing close to their tails. Each one exuded pride as they wiggled and drank up the morning sun. "I don't know how I'll ever repay them if they knew they'd done something extraordinary," Elliot stated with a heartfelt smile. Officer Martinez grinned broadly at the corners of his mouth. "To begin with, with similar instincts, you might want to consider enrolling them in official security training." The pups had an unstoppable thought that solidified in Elliot's mind. Already demonstrated their bravery and dedication, but with the right instruction, they could grow much more powerful in the future. When he called a well-known canine training academy one day to explain what had transpired, the director was intrigued, offered to personally visit the estate to evaluate the pups' potential in the days that followed the story's publication. Break-in and the brave pups rapidly went viral, with local newspapers publishing headlines like, "Millionaire dogs protect the day from robbers in a bold heist," and "Puppies become protectors." The mansion was formerly the focus of. The neighbors who had previously made fun of Elliot's decision to adopt the puppies now saw it as a sign of tenacity and devotion. Mrs. Harris, who had previously regarded Elliot as crazy, came with a message of encouragement. As she watched Riley and Harper play on the homemade cookie basket, she remarked, "I can't believe how brave they were." Elliot happily appreciated the generosity. "But you must be really proud, Lon." He nodded in response, remembering the chilly stares and whispers he had heard from these same individuals only weeks before. Simply put, they've always been unique. Later that week, a wiry man named Victor, the academy's trainer, arrived. With a keen eye and a clear love for dogs, he closely examined the puppies. Observing their agility and reactivity, Victor is truly astounding. Stated during his evaluation that while each of them has good intuition, what's really remarkable is how they function as an unusual unit, particularly in dogs with such varied backgrounds. Elliot. Victor nodded, beaming with delight. "Do you think they do well with formal training?" "Indeed, under proper supervision, they may receive training for advanced security, search and rescue, or even therapeutic work." The decision was made to push the skis to the limit with these 7. And over the following few months, the pups experienced intense. The once playful and sometimes disorderly pack gained discipline and sophisticated skills via training under Victor's guidance. They still had their lighthearted moments while executing synchronized tactics and spotting intruders. The youngest, Riley, frequently attempted to steal candy from Victor's pocket, but their development was evident when Elliot deployed cutting-edge surveillance equipment as part of his efforts to strengthen the mansion's security. He strengthened the perimeter fencing, but above all, he trusted his newfound protector's intuition. The way the society viewed Elliot kept changing, and parents brought their kids to see the hero puppies, and to express gratitude, local companies provided discounts and services. Elliot, ever modest, redirected the pups provided me a family by planning a little charity event to gather money for nearby animal shelters. Stated in a moving address that's only fair to return the favor. The event was a huge success and was attended by. The pups are now local celebrities, and hundreds of people are willing to assist the cause. We're lavished with love, gifts, and even personalized chew toys and treats. Despite the increasing attention, life at the mansion calmed down and they wore collars with their names etched. Elliot, who had previously felt alone, continued to enjoy the comforts of his new home as the pups began their training. Found himself surrounded by the warmth and company he had long desired in his lavish mansion. Elliot sat on the porch with Bailey at his feet and cuddled up in the twilight as the sun sank below the horizon. The other puppies played close by, chasing fireflies and falling over one another while he was on his lap. Elliot whispered softly, caressing Riley's fur, "I have completely changed my life. I believed I was saving you, but as it happens, you saved me." The puppies appeared to comprehend their wagging stories and loving gazes, expressing their unspoken pledge to always defend the guy who had given them another chance with the pups. After their training and bravery made headlines, the media quickly became even more interested in their narrative. Elliot discovered that he was constantly being approached for interviews, photo shoots, and even business negotiations. Despite his initial reluctance, he consented to a few since he wanted to be sure that despite the media frenzy, the revenues will benefit local shelters and rescues, which brought unanticipated difficulties. One day, a sleek black vehicle pulled up to the gates of the estate. A woman wearing a fitted suit emerged, her poised appearance and self-assured manner matching Elliot's. As he got closer to the gate, she said, "Yes, that's me. How may I help you?" With caution, Elliot said, "I'm Vanessa Morgan, a talent agent," and she handed him a business card with gold letters embossed on it. "I represent customers who specialize in exhibiting exceptional." Elliot furrowed, "Animals, your pups are a sensation, and I would like to talk about how to capitalize on their fame." His eyebrows ungrateful for the offer, but they're family, not entertainers. Vanessa grinned, obviously unfazed by Mr. Fairchild, but consider the effect they might create a pet food company campaign that would bring in millions of dollars, some of which could go toward funding shelters, and imagine the lives that could be spared by the nation's rescues. The thought of assisting more animals made Elliot's heart race. But he was still cautious. "I'll consider it," he murmured, putting the card in his pocket as the days passed, more visitors started arriving at the mansion, including uninvited families who were excited to see the puppies there. While many were merely admirers, some became a cause, and others held signs outside the gates and called their names. When Elliot came home from the grocery store one evening, the pups were alarmed to see a man climbing the fence. They formed a defensive line at the foot of the wall as the chaos roared, their training taking effect. Elliot cried, hurrying toward the scene, "Hey, get down from there, man." Astonished, he lost his hold and fell to the ground, scurrying to his feet and yelling, "I just wanted to see them." "They're heroes," Elliot sighs, growing increasingly frustrated that this isn't a zoo. Stated unequivocally that there are other ways to demonstrate your love for animals than to volunteer at a shelter or adopt a cat in. The man gave a sheepish nod before backing off, but Elliot was unhappy about the event. He became aware that the quiet existence he had fought so hard to maintain was starting to be disrupted by the increasing attention, construct for both himself and the puppies at the same time, that conflicts emerged inside the local community. Some became jealous while others rejoiced in the pup's fame. Mr. Carmichael, a neighbor, expressed his disapproval at a town meeting. He flaunts his money with that enormous estate, which is bad enough, but now Carmichael sneers. With those dogs, he's made it into a circus, and the attention is disturbing our neighborhood. Another neighbor, Mrs. Langley, defended Elliot, saying that dogs saved lives and are benefiting the community. What have you got? Recently, Ms. Carmichael, the meeting turned into a contentious argument with several supporting Carmichael and others who were complimenting Elliot and the puppies who had come to the gathering to talk about. He was caught in the crossfire of possible gifts to the neighborhood park as. After he went, a reporter came up to him, holding a microphone. "Mr. Fairchild, how do you?" Elliot hesitated and carefully considered his words before responding to claims that your pets are disturbing the peace. Many people have found happiness and hope in dogs. If that's deemed a disturbance, then I guess I'm at fault. Nevertheless, despite the difficulties, I will always prioritize doing what is best for them and the community. Found comfort in the puppies, and as they completed their training, which now included collaboration, their relationship only grew stronger. Exercises intended to improve their teamwork. Victor, the trainer, was astounded by their development. He observed during session that Bailey is developing into a superb leader and Riley has unrivaled quick thinking, and they function as a family rather than just a pack. Elliot was unable to assist. However, when the puppies relaxed one evening, I realized that they had taught me more about love and loyalty than I ever imagined. Vanessa Morgan called Elliot by the fireside. "Mr. Fairchild, I can see why you were hesitant, but there's a fresh opportunity that you might find interesting. A documentary. A filmmaker would like to convey your narrative about more than simply the puppies." Elliot paused, saying, "I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that level of detail." Vanessa reassured him that this is about spreading a message, not seeking fame, of hope's tenacity and the connection between people and animals. Consider the influence it might have. After a lengthy silence, Elliot said, "I'll think about it, but only." He looked at the 7 canines snuggled up together as he hung up, wondering if the attention would still be on the puppies and the cause. Happiness in sharp contrast to the difficulties encircling them. Thus, whatever choice he made would benefit them. Yet as the weeks went by, Elliot struggled with the weight of the many animals still waiting for a second chance. Of his choices, the dog's reputation kept growing as tales of their valor circulated around. From businesses and groups rushed in, offering everything from public appearances to ads, each promising not just financial benefits, as well as venues to draw attention to the predicament of rescued animals. However, Elliot couldn't get rid of a persistent fear that seizing these chances would undermine the straightforward Paul. He had promised the pups a tranquil life, but he was beginning to wonder if the advantages really justified the risks. Expenses on a cool fall day, Elliot sat on his expansive back porch. Riley, the most loving of the pack, was surrounded by the pups. Sensing his stress, she pressed her nose against his hand. "You always know, don't you?" Elliot scratched behind her ears and whispered, "If you were me, what would you do?" The golden retriever's soulful eyes looked up at him, and her quiet presence was more consoling than any guidance could be. Victor saw Elliot's preoccupied manner when he came for their planned training session just after. He noticed Elliot's sigh, "I just don't know," and hesitated. "You've got a lot on your mind." Vanessa, my neighbors, the media, and everyone else appear to have an opinion, which I don't want to lose if I'm doing the correct thing. Victor nodded carefully, seeing what's vital. "You know, Elliot, these dogs already understand the value of love, loyalty, and giving it their all right now. The question is, are you staying?" As they observed the puppies darting across the yard in their lively manner, Elliot pondered Victor's remarks in accordance with those ideals. Vigor in sharp contrast to the burden he was carrying that night, Elliot made the decision to attend a neighborhood fundraising event at the nearby shelter in the hopes of reestablishing a connection with the origins of his purpose when he entered. Volunteers bustled around the small event space, which was lively with conversation. When Elliot and the puppies arrived, the room fell silent for a moment as tables were set up and loaded with donated items for the auction. At that point, the shelter director, a generous woman named Teresa, hurried to meet him, saying, "We're so happy you could make it, Elliot. Sincerely, you've already done so much for us." Elliot felt a twinge of remorse in the midst of. He hadn't been to the shelter as frequently as he used to because of the upheaval of the last several weeks, and he was observing the worn walls and the commitment written on each volunteer's face. He came to see how important the job being done here was even during when a young boy came up to him with a crayon depiction of the puppies. He inquired, "Mister, are these your dogs?" Shyly, Elliot squatted, grinning. "Did you draw this?" The boy nodded, red-faced. "I aspire to be as courageous and strong as they are when I grow up." In that instant, Elliot realized the actual strength of the puppies. Narrative as a source of motivation the following day, rather than as a show, brought the puppies into the living area so they could influence his decision. He put Vanessa Morgan's business card next to a shelter fundraiser booklet on the coffee table. "What do you guys think?" he said out loud. "Do we take advantage of the major chances in the hopes of changing things? Or do we remain the same and keep things straightforward?" Riley barked quietly as the other pups watched Bailey, the unofficial leader, approach and place a paw on a leaflet. Elliot chuckled, and they wagged their tails. "So you're suggesting that we remain grounded? But continue to look for methods to assist those intelligent dogs with their quiet affirmation." Elliot decided he would carefully utilize the puppy's fame while maintaining the principles that brought them initially together. A few days later, Elliot called Vanessa Morgan to inform her of his choice, saying, "I'm willing to work together on a few projects, but only if the money raised goes directly toward rescues and shelters," he said. Vanessa agreed that the puppies and their narrative must remain the main focus, not me. Conviction in his voice, which I believe is an excellent strategy. "Elliot, let's get started." Elliot was relieved to have taken charge of the story and felt a feeling of relaxation as he hung up. That the pup's narrative was still genuine and powerful after that week, Elliot went back to the shelter with a specific strategy, Teresa, and he started by explaining how. "Would you be interested in working with me to create a campaign to encourage adoption of the puppies? I could assist spread the word about." Teresa's eyes brightened, and Elliot thought, "That would be amazing. We've noticed a rise in adoptions because of your tale, but this might go further." Together, they came up with concepts for a series of touching films highlighting the animals in shelters and the changes that love and care can bring about. By the month's conclusion, the first campaign went live, and the videos included. As they played and trained, the puppies interacted with shelter animals, showing warmth and patience. Together, the response was tremendous, with adoption and gifts flooding in. Elliot watched one of the movies from the comfort of his living room while the pups crowded around him, his questions skyrocketing. A notification appeared on his phone as he reached for the remote control. Comment from a person who recently acquired an elderly dog that was highlighted in the campaign. "I appreciate you sharing your." Elliot grinned as he read the narrative, which motivated us to provide Max with a forever home. Despite the difficulties along the way, feeling deeply purposeful and adhering to his principles had ultimately led to. Elliot's campaign's astounding success gave shelters across the country hope, but it also, while the puppies were praised as heroes and the campaign received attention from unexpected and possibly unwanted he's praised for its influence. Although rumors of doubt started to circulate in some people in circles questioned Elliot's intentions, while others looked into his past in an effort to find anything negative. One evening while Elliot was sitting at the table, the picture of the man behind the now famous canines. As he was finishing up preparations for an impending adoption campaign, he noticed a notification on his phone. It was a Fairchild's Hero Dogs, a news item with a big and aggressive headline. Elliot scowled as he clicked on the article's link, wondering if it was a real mission or a publicity hoax. Described his recent endeavors, but alluded to hidden agendas, implying that a former co-worker from Elliot's corporate days said that his quick ascent to fame was planned rather than sincere. He asserted that Elliot always had a talent for using circumstances to his advantage. This is simply one more illustration of that. Elliot's stomach rumbled because he had decided years ago to leave that world behind, to establish a life based on morality and purpose, but it appeared that his history was Victor showed up for the pup's training session the following morning after being dug up to undermine his efforts. He asked, "Have you seen the news?" with an extremely solemn expression, and Elliot nodded, pointing to the paper that was open on his laptop. "It's annoying, but I can't allow it stop us from moving forward," Victor hesitated, since there's a video going viral online that isn't just that article. Purported inquiry alleging that you're employing the puppies, who were taught as part of some covert scheme to give fame. Victor took out his phone, and Elliot froze, thinking that was ridiculous. Displaying the ill-executed video to Elliot, which featured menacing music and grainy, according to the narrator, who showed footage of the puppies in their early training days. Elliot had bought the canines from an unidentified elite breeder and made up their tale of rescue in order to strengthen his. Elliot's jaw tensed as he realized that this was a flagrant lie. Those dogs were spared. Victor nodded. "I understand. From terrible circumstances, all we've done has been to serve others, not to boost my ego. That, and so do those who have witnessed your efforts. But since this type of stuff spreads quickly, you must deal with it." Before it became popular that night, Elliot sat in front of his computer and wrote a brief message. "Being sincere, I want to put the record straight and address the rumors directly to everyone who has helped us along the way. Straight. My dogs are rescue survivors rather than elite specimens bred for celebrity. Together, we have worked hard to change their lives after years of abuse and adversity, and in the process, we have helped others. Love, redemption, and second chances have always been central to my mission. I will maintain that despite everything." Elliot experienced a brief moment of anxiety after sharing the remark on social media. Would it be sufficient to combat the negativity? The days that followed provided a range of responses that many people united behind. Elliot recounting their individual encounters with the campaign's inspiration. Responses flooded in from families expressing gratitude to him for his efforts after adopting animals from a shelter. But due to sensationalized publications and clickbait titles, there were persistent murmurs of doubt. One evening, a knock at Elliot's musings were interrupted by a door, which he opened to reveal a middle-aged guy standing there with the expression stern. "Mr. Fairchild," the man said. "Yes, that's me." Elliot cautiously answered, "I'm a detective. There have been some alarming reports regarding the pets in your care, Harris. If I visit, please be aware that Elliot's heart is sinking." What kinds of allegations? Harris was hesitant to accept anonymous tips about that claimed abuse, and it is routine practice to investigate faulty ownership documents. Asserts that Elliot moved aside to let the detective enter. "Feel free to take a peek." But I can guarantee you that those accusations are unfounded because the pups closely followed Harris as he explored the estate. Tails. He waved as he saw their spotless kennels, plenty of food supplies, and the cozy bond. They told Elliot that by the end of the visit, his manner had softened and everything appeared to be in order. Harris. "Admittedly, these canines are obviously well cared for, but considering the level of attention you're receiving, you might want to get ready." Despite Harris's assurances, the experience left Elliot wanting deeper examination. Startled, he noticed little alterations in his everyday neighbors who had previously avoided making eye contact, and guests loitered around the estate gates for too long. Even the puppies appeared to observe a change in their behavior, being more watchful and defensive when they go on walks. One evening, while watching the property security camera's footage, Elliot saw something strange. Around midnight, a dark-clad figure had arrived at the gate and lingered for a few minutes before. Elliot's chest constricted as he ducked into the shadows, attempting to interfere with his attempts to safeguard his family and their purpose. Elliot engaged a private detective to investigate the origin of the internet attacks and misinformation. The results were startling and discouraging, it seems. The investigation revealed that Richard Kane, a former business associate, is responsible for this. Elliot's eyes furrowed as he fed these stories to the media and internet forums. During Elliot's corporate career, Richard Kane had been a vicious rival who was notorious for using devious methods. It appeared that Kane was using Elliot's recent fame as a weapon to exact retribution for an old grudge rather than give in to. Angry, Elliot made the decision to try something new. He contacted a reliable writer and offered an exclusive interview to give the complete account of his experience, from his choice to quit the corporate world to saving the The essay that resulted from the pups and the objective they had created together gave a clear and candid account of Elliot's existence. And his affection for his pets brought to light the difficulties they encountered and the lives they impacted. As the piece gained popularity, public opinion started to change in response to the unquestionable reality that countered the negative narrative. Supporting comments continued to pour in, and even some of Elliot's detractors acknowledged that they had been too fast to judge. But Kane's influence persisted, and Elliot felt he was still involved in the fight. Had to remain watchful with the puppies by his side, and he decided to meet any obstacles that arose. Resilience is evidence of the strength of love and willpower following the disclosures regarding Richard Kane's engagement. Elliot discovered that he was thinking a lot about his experience and the relationships that had influenced the pups. He served as a source of inspiration and stability as usual, but the recent unrest had also made Elliot's connections with those who had supported him during the difficulties. One such ally was retired Victor. One evening, as the sun was setting, a military trainer who had evolved into a trusted friend, as well as a mentor for the dogs, gave the estate a warm light beneath the horizon. Victor joined Elliot on the porch with a hot cup of coffee in. "My friend," Victor observed, "and you've been through the ringer," as he settled into the wooden chair next to Elliot. "But I must." Elliot grinned slightly and said, "You've handled it with more grace than most." "I'm not," Victor agreed. "I've tried to stay focused on what matters, but I'm not sure about grace." His eyes wandered to the field where the puppies were playing. "Those dogs are proof that what counts is right there. Resilience. And you too, Elliot." Victor's remarks were appreciated, but although the effects of a recent attack are still felt, it's difficult to avoid feeling discouraged at every turn. Victor leaned forward, his face solemn, as if someone were about to drag us back, and then let. "Elliot, people recognize that you've created something genuine here. No matter how much muck someone pours at it, it always manages to shine through thanks to Victor's encouragement." Elliot made the decision to return his attention to the pups and the purpose they stood for, and he started organizing a day-long community event to highlight the dogs' training, tell their tales, and spreading the word about shelter animals. And as the event got closer, support started to come in. Neighbors from unexpected places who had previously avoided contact suddenly offered their services. Local companies donated food and goods to assist with logistics. Detective Harris, who had previously carried out the inquiry, even went out to advertising materials if you needed. He said over the phone, "I've seen firsthand what you're doing, and I'd be honored to let you know if you need security or crowd control." As the event's planning intensified, Elliot discovered that he was spending more time with each of the puppies. One evening, while working with Harper, the astute border collie mix, they strengthened their training and strengthened their relationship. Harper was pacing close to the fence with her nose to the ground, and her ears perked up with alertness when Elliot saw something strange. Harper barked once as Elliot said, "What is it, girl?" Harper approached warily. Elliot followed her lead and quickly saw what had captured her as she ran for the gate, her stance controlled but strained. Notice a tiny, shaky puppy curled up in the brush just outside. It was a scruffy terrier mix, with matted fur and huge, terrified eyes. Elliot stooping and holding out his hand, he whispered, "Easy now, you're safe here." Harper appeared to reassure the terrified dog by sitting next to him. The terrier slowly advanced with its tail wagging after a short while. Back at the house, Harper and Elliot collaborated to feed and clean the newcomer, whom Elliot named Scout. Over the next few days, Terrier underwent a spectacular metamorphosis. Scout, who had before been cautious and distrustful, soon bloomed under. The addition of Scout to their household felt like a minor but important change in the care of Elliot and the other dogs. This served as a reminder of Elliot's initial motivation for starting this adventure on the day of the community gathering. The grounds were surrounded with rows of tents and booths, and the estate was bustling with activity. In one devoted to a distinct facet of the purpose, there were educational seminars on dog skills demonstrations, and puppies from local shelters are featured in animal care and adoption drives. Stole the show. Harper, under Victor's tutelage, performed flawlessly and amazed the audience with her agility, while Bailey, the group's gentle giant, demonstrated his capacity to reassure apprehensive kids even. In a straightforward obedience demonstration, the team's newest member, Scout, received praise for his fierce resolve. With his heart racing, Elliot faced the sizable audience and spoke from the heart as he entered the stage toward the conclusion of the day. Telling the pups about his adventure and the difficulties they overcame together isn't simply about. Despite the emotions that threatened to overcome him, he spoke steadily as he explained that rescuing pets is about. What these animals have taught me, and what they can teach us all, is that they are resilient, loyal, and love-free. Provided me with more than I could ever pay back. And I hope that by doing this work, we can allow others to. The ensuing thunderclap was as loud, but what really stood out were the interpersonal relationships formed that day. Elliot was approached by significant families who had adopted shelter dogs to tell their story, and the kids grinned as they petted the puppies, and their laughter reverberated throughout the grounds. Some of Elliot's old detractors even spoke quietly about apology and appreciation, but one instance in particular, a small child with his parents right behind him, Elliot squatted to pet Harper, his eyes wide with amazement. "Like me," he replied gently, indicating Harper's leg scar from earlier. Elliot knelt next to him, his throat constricted with grief, and she refused to give up her wounds. Yes, Elliot stood with her as the sun set on the successful event, and neither she nor you gave up, Victor remarked. Watching the crowd disperse feels like a turning point. Victor gave him a shoulder clap in response to his hopeful voice, saying, "You've shown them the success of the community event was a high moment for Elliot. It's something they won't forget." Elliot and the puppies. But soon after, problems started to arise once more as news spread about the incident's effects and the expanding. Those who disapproved of Elliot's presence and favored the status quo heard support for his mission. The elitism and exclusivity of the community. One evening, as Elliot was cooking dinner, Harper, the vigilant protector, barked and took her place in front of the house as a sharp knock reverberated throughout it. Elliot gingerly walked up to the door, her tail stiff, and opened it to see Richard Kane standing on the. With two associates on either side, Richard started speaking. Radiating contempt, "I've heard you've turned into a local hero, planning activities that motivate the." Elliot's jaw tightened. "What do you want, Richard? You must be proud, community." Richard grinned and moved closer to make you an offer. "Go now and sell this home." Elliot's eyes furrowed, and he asked why I would do that. "Take your dogs and go. I'll even make it worth your while. You're making enemies in places you don't want to." Richard stated in a deepening tone, "People don't like being shown up, particularly by someone like you. And if you're not careful, things may turn unpleasant." Harper gave a low growl as she sensed the tense, but Elliot put a soothing hand on her head and said, "I don't fear bullies." Richard's grin wavered as he added firmly, "This place, these dogs, this mission is bigger than you and your threats." Just before he shrugged, he said, "Suit yourself, but don't say I didn't warn you." Elliot felt a knot of rage, an uneasiness build in his breast as Richard and his associates left. He knew Richard. The man wasn't bluffing. He had connections and resources that may lead to serious problems later that week. Showed up as a number of disturbances, the first of which was an arbitrary health examination with official searching. After examining the property and giving a list of minor violations, an anonymous complaint regarding noise was received from the dogs that resulted in a local law enforcement visit. But Elliot was able to handle every problem despite the ongoing monitoring. Where on him and the team one evening, when Elliot was going over some documents, he heard. He hurried to the porch after hearing a disturbance outside and discovered Scout barking wildly at A. The men dispersed the group of people around the fence upon noticing that Elliot had left spray-painted inscriptions on. "You don't belong here, Elliot, and leave the estate's outer walls." Fell as he washed the graffiti off, and the pups remained around the following morning, observing his uneasiness and attempting to. Harper, who was watching him closely, said, "Scare us, but we're not leaving." Elliot intensified his efforts and reached out to local allies, determined not to let fear to control his behavior. Including Detective Harris, I shared the incident. "Although I can't confirm that Richard Kane is responsible, I am certain that he is behind this, Elliot." Harris agreed and added, "Leave it to me. I'll investigate it in the interim." Elliot, He strengthened the property's boundaries and installed security cameras with the goal of safeguarding the estate and the puppies. Additionally, contacted Victor, who organized a group of retired officers to offer more assistance Despite Elliot's measures, the pressure kept increasing, and rumors about the episodes were spread by local gossip. Some questioned if Elliot's presence was worth the problems it caused for the neighborhood. Supporters gathered around him over time, creating a petition to refute the unfounded grievances and requesting. At a town council meeting, the situation escalated due to a lack of accountability from local authorities. Victor and a few families who had acquired rescue canines from his organization were among the allies that went. Tension was high in the meeting room as both supporters and critics crowded in. Richard Kane was sat among the members of the council, made it apparent that this isn't just about one man and his dogs. Stated in a cool, collected manner that it's about maintaining the integrity of our community. We have laws and standards for a reason. And Elliot maintained his composure in the face of. Richard's speech started out strongly and clearly, expressing his feelings, which are that he is terrified of change, fearful of what this community might turn into if we let various voices inside our hearts and doors spread over the room as Elliot went on. But the reality is that individuals are already experiencing change, realizing the importance of empathy and community. People are putting optimism ahead of fear, and no amount of coercion will stop that. As Elliot sat down, his fans applauded, including some. Richard's face was softened by the thoughtful looks of the council members, but they maintained their controlled demeanor. The discussion ended without a definitive conclusion, but Elliot departed with a greater sense of, more determined than ever. He understood that the battle was not yet done, but he also realized that he was not by himself that evening. As Elliot walked, the difficulties were overwhelming, but the connection he had with his pups gave him a renewed sense of purpose. Dogs and the community's increasing support gave him courage, so he knelt next to Harper and scratched her behind. He murmured softly, "We face the wind together, no matter what comes next." Carried a sense of anticipation for the fight over the estate and everything it held as it rustled through the trees. Represented was far from over. But as the stress increased, Elliot was prepared. Elliot was aware that the time for conflict with Richard Kane and his supporters was approaching. When attempts to scare him reached a breaking point, Elliot realized that the altercation was about more than just. One clear morning, Elliot decided to uphold his mission while also standing up for the values that characterized him. Received a formal letter from the town council requesting a special hearing, citing concerns regarding community values and how his actions affected peace in the community, even though Elliot knew this was. Victor, who had turned into a staunch confidant, joined Elliot at the hearing, which Richard K. was doing as a showdown. Victor said in a solemn tone, "This isn't just about shutting you down," as they went over the letter at the kitchen table. "It's about setting an example to deter others from confronting individuals like Kane Elliot. If you nod, then it's time." In the days preceding the hearing, Elliot painstakingly prepared to demonstrate to them that intimidation is ineffective. Collected testimonials from households that have adopted dogs via his program and assembled financial documents attesting to his operations were ethical, and he asked for quotes from nearby companies and supporters of his cause. He even had Detective Harris prepare to discuss the unfounded grievances and vandalism, while the puppies appeared to. Harper remained near Elliot to maintain her composure despite the seriousness of the situation. Scout, who was always the spirited one, would give Elliot a gentle prod. Bailey, the kind giant, appeared to patrol the estate with new toys if he became too serious. When the day of the hearing came, Elliot entered the town hall with the intention of defending their shared residence. Victor, Detective Harris, and a number of supporters filled the room with a large number of some skeptics, some allies, some familiar faces, and some who have not yet received assistance at. Richard Kane was seated prominently among the council members at the head of the room, and his expression was arrogant, his stance relaxed as though the result had already been determined. Richard presented his case at the start of the meeting, portraying Elliot's operations as disruptive and asserting they had damaged the neighborhood's identity, he said, citing the unfounded grievances and framing the recent Occurrences to demonstrate how Elliot's presidency was sowing discord. When Elliot's turn to speak came, he stood up. What's really upsetting, he started, is the notion that kindness and the threat to the community is not related to noise complaints or property prices. Rather, it's concerning dread of change and the implications of accepting something different. He provided facts that contradicted Richard's assertions. He detailed the lives that the dogs he had been saved and instructed about the bonds made throughout the community and the power inherent in solidarity back then. He invited people to speak, and one mother moved to tears as she described how getting a dog from Elliot had helped her son get over anxiety. A neighborhood store owner spoke about how community involvement has increased since Elliot's event even. Detective Harris confirmed that a large number of Elliot's allegations were baseless and most likely intentional. Mr. Harrove, an elderly man who had been a mute observer at several of the events, gave the most compelling testimony. I used to believe that people like Elliot didn't belong here, but after his occurrences, he acknowledged that his voice was hesitant. As the testimony came to an end, I understood that I had been mistaken and that he had demonstrated to us what true community looked like. Even those who had first supported Richard started to whisper among themselves as the atmosphere in the room changed. Richard's serious expressions, felt his grip weakening, were a rejoinder. Remember that he stated in a harsh tone that this is about protecting the. Elliot didn't rise to the bait, which is why our town has regulations. Instead, he addressed the council members personally. If integrity entails disregarding what is right, then, after hours of discussion, the council declared they would meet again, suggesting it might be time to reconsider our values. When Elliot left the hall the following day to give their judgment, he was greeted with a mixture of handshakes and applause from supporters. Richard, however, hurled a mask of annoyance off of his face that, back at the estate that evening, Elliot collected the puppies for a peaceful period of contemplation while they sat on the porch with Harper by his side. He experienced a profound sense of peace regardless of the result, knowing late that night, when the estate was quiet and peaceful, he had done everything he could to defend his beliefs. Harper barked, keeping her ears open, and Scout heard an unusual sound break the silence. Elliot walked outside his heart, grabbed a flashlight, and joined her in her low growl. He heard two individuals trying to hide in the shadows while he was hammering close to the back fence. He yelled out in a firm voice. Harper ran after the figures after they paused, her piercing bark resonating through the darkness. Despite the intruder's escape, Elliot followed his flashlight as it cut through the darkness, leaving behind tools. Bolt cutters and spray paint cans were used to make their intentions obvious. It was another attempt to scare him, but the following morning, as Elliot was getting ready to head back to the council meeting, he received a call, but he refused to be shaken. Detective Harris stated, "We have identified the men from last night. Given their connections to Richard Kane Elliott, this might be the last." Long shadows generated by the early sun were a piece of evidence that revealed Richard's actual intentions and swung the tide in his favor. As Elliot arrived at the council meeting across town, the air in the hall was charged with the supporters crowded the room in anticipation of the final judgment. Their optimistic looks a sharp contrast to the tense. Richard Kane's supporters' reactions as Elliot arrived with Detective Harris at his side and the new evidence. Richard felt the burden of the last few weeks due to the intruders, yet the resolute expressions on his. The council members brought the meeting to order when his supporters strengthened his determination, and the chairperson started following. After much consideration, we are here to declare our choice for Mr. Elliot Hartman's operations going forward. Detective Harris raised his hand in our town before the council's decision being made, saying, "I must." The room went hushed as you presented important evidence about recent attempts to undermine Mr. Hartman's work. Turned to face Harris when he came forward with a fire last night, and 2 people were apprehended, entering Mr. Hartman's property with the intention of damaging. Investigation. We learned that they were related to none other than Mr. Richard Kane. The audience gasped as we revealed this. This is an unfounded accusation, and Richard sprang up suddenly, his face going white. He yelled. Detective Harris did not reveal his identity, and the proof is indisputable. Mr. Kane's phone, witness accounts and payment records that may be linked to you put you at the heart of this scam. What you did was Not just immoral, but also a clear breach of the law. The council members looked at one another with grim expressions. "This is a serious matter. You are," the chairwoman said to Richard, "Mr. Kane, being suspended from your post while a proper investigation is conducted." Richard's confidence collapsed, and he retreated into his chair, his mouth moving back and forth as though he were trying to find words that would not come. Elliot inhaled deeply and moved forward and said, "This isn't just about me." His tone was hard but steady. "Regarding the type of community we wish to create, do we embrace it or do we let fear and prejudice guide our decisions?" One by one, the audience whispered their agreement in sympathy and solidarity. Supporters started to stand and express their gratitude for Elliot's work and his ability to persevere in the face of hardship. Mr. Hartman's program saved my life when I saw a middle-aged woman named Rose holding a picture of her son with a rescue dog. When no one else had faith in his son, his relationship with his dog gave him meaning, and another guy broke down in tears. Glistening in his eyes, my dog, Bailey, was my lone companion when my wife passed away last year. Partner at the most difficult circumstances. Mr. Hartman trained that dog, and he's not. The testimonials changed the tide decisively in Elliot's favor, and he is not just protecting animals, but also people. Count participants who had previously expressed skepticism now looked touched by the overwhelming support as the chairwoman. A quick movement attracted everyone's attention as Richard Kane stood with his face averted, ready to read the council's verdict. "You all believe this man is a hero because he spat, but it was a mix of desperation and wrath. He is merely a publicity stunt that takes advantage of your feelings for his own benefit." Elliot stayed calm. "The only. Richard, you are the one taking advantage of people here. And now that the truth is out," the audience cheered and applauded. Security guards silenced Richard's complaints and let him out of the room. The chairwoman cleared her throat to restore order after his attempts to justify himself were ignored. "The council has made a unanimous decision after examining all available information and taking into account the testimonies. Mr. Hartman's actions are not only acceptable, but also praiseworthy, and we are." The audience erupted in laughter as we were honored to have someone of his caliber in our neighborhood. Elliot's supporters cheered and rushed forward, patting him on the back and shaking his hand. Elliot's eyes were filled with tears. Later that day, back at the estate, Elliot stood on the porch with Harper Scout and gazed out at the gathering. Bailey's fans had come on the lawn with him, carrying banners of thanks, food, flowers, and Mara. "You did it," Victor exclaimed, clinking his glass of lemonade as he walked up. Responding to Elliot's no, Elliot said, looking at the audience, "We did it." The sound of kids laughing caught his eye. Families were playing on the grass with their adopted pets, and their happiness was evidence of. Elliot felt a profound feeling of peace as the sun set, illuminating the sky in shades of orange and gold, representing everything he had battled for. The community's relationship with the dogs he loved so much made the difficult battle worthwhile. For the first time in months, the tide of prejudice had shifted, and Elliot allowed himself to. Harper laid her head on his lap and relaxed. The fading sunshine was reflected in her amber eyes. "This was only the beginning," said, caressing her fur, "and we'll continue to change things together." As the sun set, long shadows were spread across the landscape, signaling the end of the festivities at the estate. Elliot stood on the front steps of the expansive property, Harper by his side, observing. The final families pack up their things and go for home, their faces beaming as the dogs danced. A living witness to their triumphs was the tails wagging beside them. But there was one final surprise. Watched as Elliot went to go inside, but he was stopped in his tracks when he heard a car engine roaring up the driveway. A young girl and a well-dressed man with a friendly smile emerged from the sleek black automobile as it pulled up. A dirty golden puppy with his ears flopped was holding a leash at the end of it. Every time Mr. Hartman bounced, the man started to reach out. "My name is Charles Preston, and I am the CEO. I had to visit after hearing about your accomplishments at the National Canine Therapy Foundation." Elliot shook his hand in a bewildered and intrigued manner, and I did the same. Preston indicated, "It's an honor, Mr. Preston. What brings you all this way?" "My daughter Lily, who is this small child, wanted to give you a very unique thank you gift. You can see her puppy." Lily went forward, her small hands clutching Milo as he was trained utilizing methods influenced by your work. "Thank you, Mr. Harmon," she replied, scarcely raising her voice above a whisper, for the leash. Milo made me feel brave once more. Elliot knelt down and looked at Lilier. Preston touched his palm and said, "The brave one, Lily. Milo just helped you see it. I have been following your journey, the difficulties you have encountered, and the work you have done. It's nothing short of exceptional, which is why I'm here." He took an envelope out of his pocket, presenting Elliot with the official letter that offered a collaboration between the foundation and Elliot's initiative. Preston stated that you may use our resources to help you broaden your vision. Imagine bringing your training techniques to a national level and seeing facilities like this one change lives in every state. As he read the letter, Elliot's heart raced since the offer provided access to training in addition to financial help. A network of therapists and a group of experts who would include the dogs into their programs. I'm not sure how to respond. Elliot eventually stumbled with a lot of emotion. Preston grinned as he said, "Yes, say that together. We can make this bigger." More than any of us had ever thought possible that evening. As the house became silent, Elliot sat. Preston's letter splayed across his desk as he studied. The weight of although the opportunity seemed endless, he was prepared to bear the weight of it until a knock on the door interrupted his train of thinking. "Victor, you appear to be a man attempting to solve all of the world's problems in a single evening as you carried 2 mugs of steaming coffee," Victor said as he put down a mug, and Elliot laughed while stroking his hair. "I simply want to start, but I never imagined it would get to this point. There's a possibility to save thousands of lives now." So Victor leaned against the desk with that contemplative look on his face. "Elliot, this facility isn't just about the dogs. It's about, if anyone can, please hope for them, the people in need in this town." Elliot nodded as the seriousness of Victor's remarks sunk him. "This is you. We'll need a larger team, more room, and a lot of work," Victor smiled. With Preston's support, the ensuing weeks were hectic, but we're prepared for it. As Elliot's program grew quickly, new training facilities and kennels were constructed, hiring locals who had previously questioned him, trainers, and volunteers who came from all around the nation eager to learn from. The first significant project using Elliot's techniques was a regional therapy center that was created to train canines for families from nearby towns who have PTSD-stricken veterans and children with unique needs. Many people who came to observe the work in progress left with a renewed respect for the program, and occasionally a new 4-legged friend. Family member, the neighborhood, which had previously opposed the changes, has now accepted them with silently welcomed back old detractors like Miss Calloway and Richard Kane, expanded olive branches that volunteered at events and provided supplies. The change was evident on the Harper stood behind Elliot at the podium on the day of the center's grand opening. "I began this by having rows of recently trained therapy dogs wait behind him with their handlers, eager to meet their new homes." Elliot started off speaking steadily as he traveled to honor the connection between people and animals. "But I discovered that this connection is stronger than I could have ever dreamed. It can mend broken hearts, bridge gaps, and bring out the best in everyone." He stopped to look at the audience, which included kids and elderly people who were laughing, grinning, and families coming together because of the happiness these pets brought into their life. He went on, "This isn't just my work, it's ours, and we're building together." The crowd exploded in applause as ribbons were cut, and the first families went onto the stage, marking something that will last for generations. As the day came to an end, Elliot stood at the edge of the training field, waiting to greet their new canine friends. As the sun sank, the scene was bathed in a golden glow as Harper and Bailey played with the newest recruits. Victor clapped his shoulder and joined him, saying, "Look, Elliot, this is." Elliot grinned broadly and said, "What a change. It's only the beginning." Elliot realized he had discovered not just a mission, but a legacy one as the sounds of barking and laughter filled the air. Founded on a man's dogs, his unwavering link with the town they saved together, and trust, resilience, and Elliot discovered the training center's expansive fields bathed in long, golden rays as the sun descended. Harper, his faithful buddy, was at his feet as he stood silently by the fence, observing the action with. Despite his quiet curiosity, He could hear laughter and voices coming from nearby households. As volunteers packed up the remains of a day that will be remembered, they played with their just adopted dogs. Elliot's mind drifted back to the beginning of everything, those initial unsure steps after everyone's attendance. Since the dogs had saved him just as much as he departed the force uncertain if he would ever be able to make a difference again. They saved him from a darkness he was unaware he was in, and now they were saving others, demonstrating that the human-animal link has the power to change lives. Victor joined him with 2 cups of iced tea. "Did you ever think that your dream could become something so extraordinary?" he asked, passing a glass to Elliot. Would arrive at this point. Elliot took a sip while maintaining eye contact with the field. "In my wildest aspirations, I only wanted to treat these creatures with kindness and give them another chance. I had no idea that they would end up showing me what true hope looks like." Victor nodded, a smile spreading over his lips. "Though it's not only about the dogs, you've given this town something it didn't even realize it needed. A reason to unite. Believe it's something more than themselves." Elliot looked at the families engaging with their new surroundings. Furry friends, a golden retriever licked a child's face while the child giggled. The change was visible as the veteran knelt by a Labrador and spoke softly while the dog placed a paw on his knee. Every exchange and bond that formed in front of his eyes did that. As the event came to an end, Elliot pointed to the dogs, saying, "They're the real heroes here." The crowd then started chanting. Families swung their arms full of adoption leashes as they dispersed. Packets and sincere appreciation. Volunteers returned cartons to the storage area while discussing the upcoming major. Harper accompanied Elliot as he made his way back toward the main building. He stopped at the new addition to the entrance, a plaque honoring the program's influence, heart heavy yet full. "Read in remembrance of individuals who thought that second chances and the unbreakable tie between people and..." He brushed his fingers over animals, saying that together we can heal, grow, and build a better future. A knot formed in his throat as he spoke, realizing that the voyage no longer only belonged to him, but to everyone who had passed through those doors, touching every soul their mission had touched, and every canine that had found a home. Harper H. was at his feet as Elliot took his favorite chair by the fireplace that evening when the house went silent. Bailey, dozing close to the flame's flicker, created a cozy glow that highlighted the framed pictures in the room. Images of the innumerable lives their program has transformed on the mantle. "Victor," with a cheeky smile, he continued, "You're going to love this." He held up a tablet, and the screen was "Strays to Saviors" was the headline of a local news story on the day's events. Elliot laughed quietly and trembled as he described how one man's vision changed a community. Victor grinned and said, "You can be humble later tonight. I didn't do it alone." As Victor exited the room, Elliot reclined in his chair and said, "You should be proud." Eyes lingering on the screen, appreciative veterans' faces, and happy children. For the first time in a long time, Elliot's video was packed with wagging tails. Permitted himself to completely appreciate the scope of their accomplishments in the weeks following the program. As the collaboration with Preston's Foundation grew, new opportunities, resources, and a bigger platform to spread their message, locally skeptics had converted to ardent supporters, with their early opposition dissolving in the face of unquestionable impact. And throughout it all, the dogs continued to be the operation's central figure, each one serving as a symbol. This tale is a testament to tenacity, loyalty, and the amazing things that may occur when someone believes in you. Evidence of the effectiveness of second chances for both people and animals, not only for those who find homes. Their story of resiliency, a hope, and the unbreakable changes lives. If the human-animal link has moved you, think about helping local initiatives like these. Additionally, you won't want to miss the next video if you're eager to hear more inspiring tales of bravery and camaraderie. Let's honor the people who are able to walk on 4 legs and the heroes who stand next to them.